You remember a new title that I've given you last week? Did you forget? It is scholar, scholars.
Oh, yes.
Do you remember? I said there are three titles that I know. And in the past, I used one. I actually used researchers when I started. When I had Lindelwa addressing you as researchers. Then later on, I realized, no, man. In the Bible, they talk about the student of law. I don't know if they were referring to who was it? Was it Paul or anybody? Then I realized, man, then a student is not a small title. It's somebody. And then there's this one for researcher. Rather, on last week, I looked at them again. Then I found that there is one that talks about scholar. And it says the scholar is one who has got more experience in research. But a researcher is anyone who carries out research. It might be a novice, a well-experienced person. Then I realized, man, the bigger one is the scholar. And if I call someone a scholar who is not yet a scholar or who is striving to become a scholar, then that person would be highly motivated to try and become a scholar. And that is what made me rethink if I should not refer to you as scholars. So that is a beautiful title that we need to all aspire for, including myself. So welcome. And I want to remind you that on Thursday we had that the challenge of the thunder that was affecting me. I was in Toendo. It was the day on which it started to rain. And the majority of you agreed that we terminate the session. It was at 7 o'clock. So we had stayed for 2 hours. Sorry, for 1.5 hours. Yeah, for 1.5 hours. And I noted that even before then, I think we might have gone for an hour or for 30 minutes when I asked. Some people said no, I was disappearing, they couldn't hear me. Others said no, we can follow the slides and so on. So that session was interrupted by the thunderstorm. And when we closed, I then promised that we will repeat it so that we can finish it. And I do know that we've been, it might be boring, but repetition is revision. And if anything comes that you might have thought of, or if you have done further studies and you can make a good contribution and you can have a good discussion than before. But the example is still the same. The content is still the same. If I bring new things, new thinking, it means that my thinking has changed, or I'm becoming, I'm starting to understand maybe the concept better than before. So I think that would be the benefit that I have. I think even from your side, you might have a benefit. And I reminded you, I told you previously that we would look at Kalistinova as the source of the presentation that I've prepared. And last week I did not add the other colleagues, Vian Niemann, Alison Leslie, and all of them from Stellenbosch, including Brent van Velken. And I spoke a lot at great length about Brent because I know that he's a renowned author. Even when I was still at the college, my junior studies, I was studying fire ecology, and this gentleman was a very strong person on fire ecology. So there you can see February 2021, Kudu, African Protected Area Conservation and Science. Kudu is the South African journal, and sometimes even has got titles and studies that focus on field management. So fire ecology, you see his title is fire ecology. Sorry, his title is fire management practices in African savanna. To me, this is part and parcel of fire ecology. But fire ecology is a is a section of field management. We as environmentalists, especially as conservators, in protected areas like game reserve and nature reserves, we manage the environment. And fire is a tool of managing the vegetation, the field. It's land management. So that is where I knew this author from. But he comes from the University of Stellenbosch. So we will continue to make examples from what he has written. It's a paper that they jointly write as the three of them. Let me again remind you of our remarks. And when you had me starting automatically, and Belinda had started recording because we have promised each other that we'll start at 17:35 as usual. And thank you for agreeing to start 5 minutes after. So the recordings would be available afterwards. I will even request Belinda as well as Lindelo that they don't continue to edit the recordings of the previous session, but they can use it for administrative purposes to see how we were disrupted. That one is fine. But for us, I think we let's take this one as a formal session where our recordings should come from. And anything that comes as a challenge or as an interest, let's base it on this session, because I do believe today that we would not be disrupted. By the way, I've driven from Limpopo to Gauteng. I'm in Midrand now, and I can see that the sun is shining, but it's about to go down. So I don't think we will be disrupted again. But as always, I want to call upon you that we jointly deal with this session and the fact that we have been repeating. And I think this is the third time that we're focusing on this presentation, because the first time it was on the 14th when we thought that we would do the entire presentation. Now when I revised it, the slides go up to 98 slides. It's a lot of them. Then we dealt with some of them on the 14th. We couldn't finish. We tried doing this on the 16th. Then we were disrupted. Today is the 21st. Then we're continuing. We want to see if we cannot finish that. So I do think that you might have had enough opportunity to interact with other materials, other resources from your own perspective. And you do have your own understanding, which I think should actually assist the discussions. So let me encourage you to continue to engage as you always do. Then when I will make presentations, I will make sure that from time to time I pause and give you an opportunity. I've tried to number the sections, but if I find that I'm not completing the section, or I feel that there is time to pause, I will pause even in the middle of the section. But otherwise, the spacing gives me an opportunity, or it is a warning to remind me that I should pause. So I also want to repeat what we always talk about, that remember when we engage, we use this material as a way of facilitation. And there's a lot of things that I say, and there's a lot of aspects and concepts presented from the perspective of the author, as well as from the perspective of the example from Brian and the colleagues. And you are going to choose what you think makes sense and what you think resonates with you, that which touches your topic, that which is in line with your worldview. And when you do so, you are preparing so that you can be examined, and you need to pass with flying colors distinction, particularly when after having been marked by the study leaders, your work is going to be taken to external examiners who, in other language, are referred to as peer reviewers. So those should be convinced by the writing, and it means if you write well, then they would not have a lot of problems. But if they've got challenges or they don't understand what you're writing, they can provide guidelines on how you can improve. Or they can ask questions for clarity that, please, this section is not clear, please go and rewrite. Or please also consult this author, or please improve the citation style or the manner in which you present results. That is what they will do. It is when you have written. But in oral defense, you will have to be asked questions, and in front of the panel, you will have to respond. So you might have written well, but if you cannot articulate it verbally, then you will also have a challenge. But what I note of importance is, if you have written well, but you cannot speak, there are two ways of it. It is that somebody did write for you, it's not your work. Somebody analyzed results for you, or they've collected data, or they've undertaken the work for you, and they just presented it to you. They just put your name in there, and you adopt it. This is a challenge, because you will not grow, and you cannot, ethically, you would be challenged inside you that this is not your work, somebody wrote it for you. But on the other hand, they could say, no, this is not an extrovert. It's a person of short words. If you can answer in short words, yes, then it's fine. But if you appear not to know or understand what has been written, that is where you've got a challenge, and people will have a challenge in awarding a qualification to you. This happens particularly at PhD level. You remember that 2 weeks ago, I think it was on the 7th or the, yeah, it was on the 7th or the 14th, where I said, I was in an oral defense session where panel of experts, we have actually invited, we have presented a proposal for a student that we are promoting. I'm a co-supervisor. We have assisted him to prepare this proposal. Then he must come and make an oral presentation in front of the panel. There were 3 of them. And there I tell you that they grill. And if you don't understand your story and you don't know your story, you will be left wanting. So he was defending a proposal. But here I'm talking about the final stage when you've written the research report, which you must defend. It is important. So the choices are the ones that will navigate you, that will ensure, that will force you to actually defend them. So make rational choices. So it must not be arbitrary. And I've always said that if I make comment on your proposals, or I make comment on any of your chapter, my comment is always based on literature that I've consulted. It is not all the time that I will tell you to go and consult a specific literature. I will just guide you in the way that I understand literature to be guiding us. And again, I am very selective for literature that makes sense, that it will make logical sense and make content sense. And that does not confuse. And actually, I can see novice authors, and I can see authors that copy other authors. There is an author that is copied in 2017. This author I did use last year when I was presenting the analysis process and so on. Then I found that the content was very confusing. So those are not reputable authors. So, but what I want to say, the point is, I will always have based my comment on what I've read. So if you are not going for that and you go for something else, also find somebody who's reputable so that that person can assist you to defend the choices that you make. We continue to have one-on-one sessions, colleagues, and in one-on-one sessions, you will be able to engage with me on various concepts. That is where I We schedule it on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. We then set up a Teams meeting and we have this discussion based on what you want to understand. Sometimes it would have been a comment that I've made on your proposal or a specific chapter which you don't understand or which you are actually seeking further clarity or where you don't agree with me. And I'm so happy to say that there are people that don't always agree with me. And some of you, actually, even if they don't agree with me, they will not tell me that they don't agree with me. They will strategically indicate their point of view. And to me, that is defense. Then they persuade me to lean and to follow their thinking. And a number of you I've told, those that have engaged me, some of you do know that I say yes, here I didn't know. Here I've learned from you. Here I've learned from you. So please do teach me. And I'm not shy because I must learn every day. A researcher or a student, colleagues, you study more than your study leader. If you are a scholar, if you are a student wanting to a certain qualification, you have read more articles than us. So you are sort of an expert on the field, on your topic. And we are not shy to say, oh, this which he is presenting, or this approach that this researcher is following, I've never come across. I've been told by my previous supervisor, he said, hey, the methodology that I was using, it was participatory action research. He said, no, he has never used it and he can't do it because he's not used to it. So he says it is rarely used in tourism development. And that is what made them recognize chapter 1. The research methods chapter is the one that has contributed to the body of knowledge. So you would be knowing things and I will surrender. So colleagues, you can book me at machelehc and at machelehc@gmail.com. Make those appointments and we will discuss. This workshop focus, let's go through it. So I'll tell you what we've done and I'll tell you where we are and I'll tell you where we'll start and the end. This workshop presents guidelines on how to initiate the writing process and draft each section of the research manuscript. Yes, it's all about this. The entire presentation is about this. It will be selective. It will tell you specific sections and it will provide guidelines, generic and specific ones. I've already indicated to you that there are 7 rules that the presentation will present. And I think when I was making a presentation, when we come to a section, to the end of the section, we identify or we are assisted to identify a rule. And if you make a collection of those rules, there are strategic guidelines of the entire presentation. That is focused. That is the focus of this workshop. In addition, we'll go through different strategies for successful revision. This one we've not done, and it will be constitute the last part of this workshop. And then when we do so, those strategies, okay, each of those strategies will represent a step in the revision process and should help the writer improve the quality of the manuscript. We will discuss the issues related to the writing process of a scientific paper. We always do, and we've already started doing that. Specifically, we'll focus on what the author considers the best approaches to start a scientific paper, tips for writing each section, and best revision strategies. Actually, this is a tautology because we have already had that one. If you just continue, writing a research manuscript is an intimidating process for many novice writers in these sciences. One of the stumbling blocks is the beginning of the process and creating the first draft. We have done this, we've dealt with the introduction. I just want to move to a specific section where we start talking about the introduction. And that is where we started last week. And we tried to navigate, we could not finish. I'll move, I think, to beyond slide number 50. I think it might be 55 or so. So in order to do that, let me first pause and go out of the presentation mode so that I can fast track. This is where we're going to start. It is actually slide 56. It starts as now it is time for the introduction. We have heard last week that now that you are almost half through drafting your research paper, it is time to update your outline. I just want to remind you what we've done. We did look at the outline, and we did look at writing the results, the methods. Sorry, it was the methods section first, then the results section. So we have dealt with 3 aspects. And now we'll look at the introduction, discussion, and the strategy. So it is 3. We dealt with 3 sections, so we're left with 3. Now, the last one that we just dealt with was to write the results section. Now that you are almost half through drafting your research paper, it is time to update your outline while describing your methods and results, which are the 2 major sections that we dealt with. Many of you diverged from the original outline and refocused your ideas. And in my mind, I'm just thinking that we all know that there is a way in which the methods section and the results sections are written. And they don't specifically have to align or to be aligned with the outline that we might have made before we could even start with the process of writing this research paper for publication. And therefore, this means that we might have deviated from the outline that we might have done from the beginning of this paper that we're writing. And remember, the purpose of putting an outline was to ensure that we've got a guideline and a structure that we would follow when we are writing the entire research paper or the paper for publication. But look what happens. The methods and the results distort it because we have to follow the scientific way of writing methods, of writing the apparatus, of putting down the experiments, how it should be, the results should be tested, or the findings should be tested. All those things, including the way in which we write results. Then it might have distorted the way we've outlined the entire structure of the paper. And we are then requested, or we are then advised, just before moving to what we want to look at now, to reread the methods and the result sections and change our outline to match the research focus. As you get it now. Then we want to reconcile the outline together with the methods and the results. I don't know if you want to change the outline to fit the results and the methods, or it is the methods and the results that must fit there. But what I know is that methods have got the way in which you can write them or you can present them. And results, there's a way in which you need to present them. And we have even heard it. We even looked at how we write results, putting in the arrays or describing the arrays that are there. And then if it was qualitative, we'd be putting some specific statements there. And the logic that is needed when you're presenting results so that results can speak. And they don't have to speak for themselves. The way in which you structure them, it ensures that they communicate your findings. You make them speak to your readers because you are writing to readers, you're not writing to yourself. I am writing to you as readers, I'm not writing to myself. So you reconcile the outline and the methods. That is why you change the outline to match your research focus. Yeah, therefore, the correct thing is not to change the methods and the results. It is to change the outline to match the research focus. Now, The updated outline will help you review the general picture of your paper. It will help you review the topic, the main idea, and the purpose, which are all important for writing your introduction, because indeed all these sections need to appear in the article or in the publication. Now, the best way to structure your introduction is to follow the 3-move approach shown in Table 3. That is, when you have reconciled the outline with the results and the method section, then you can move forward to start structuring the introduction. But here we are advised of the 3 moves that are in a specific table from that book. And I've just presented which those 3 moves are, but we will later on unpack them and look them in details. Those 3 moves are: 1, to establish the territory. The second move is finding the niche, whereas the last one is talking about occupying the niche. The moves and information from your outline can help to create your introduction efficiently and without missing steps. Now, these steps, I think when you look at them, I did have a foresight on them, and we might have discussed them together on Thursday. But what I've established today is that they give you a structure and they tell you what content should be contained. What is the content that must be presented in an introduction? And this is a snapshot. Remember, the introduction is a snapshot of the entire research article. And I do agree with you that apart from the introduction, you have an abstract. And I think we might have, I don't know if it was Thursday that we made reference to the abstract. We might have made reference to it, but there should be, I think, each author would describe how articles should be written and how introductions should be written. But here we are so lucky that this author is actually guiding us on how to write the introduction. We will look at that and unpack it, and you will see if you have already written the introduction and you find that there's a mismatch here, or you were lost, then I think you can reconcile by using these guidelines. We will have an opportunity to look at the introduction as an example from Brian and the colleagues and see if they actually match all the 3 moves that are there. And if they are lacks, then it means Brian and this author don't sing from the same tune. And so that is why I say, if you make a choice not to follow this author, then you should have an alternative. And if you are like Brian, you write it, and your discipline allows you not to include these guidelines, then it will be fine. The moves and information from your outline can help you create your introduction efficiently and without missing steps. These moves are traffic signs that lead the reader through the road of your ideas. And I said the introduction is a snapshot of the entire research article. So he can find what is contained in the entire article by looking at the introduction. So the same applies to the abstract. It might be written in a different format than this one. But when I've got an article, to decide whether I can use it or I can read the entire article, I've got specific sections that I must look at. Then I run into the introduction or the abstract. So in this abstract, the author is arguing that if you don't see all those 3 things, you're not going to be interested, or you're going to be lost. You won't be carried with the author. Each move plays an important role in your paper and should be presented with deep thought and care. And I note that the moves that are presented in here are indeed the core of the entire research article. When you establish the territory, now I've said we've got 3: establishing the territory, finding the niche, and occupying the niche. Then, in summary, when you establish a territory, you place your research in context and highlight the importance of your research topic. And what came to me today, which did not come to me last Thursday when I was revising, preparing for the session, is that when I consult literature tells me that in your chapter 1, you have got the study introduction and background. A number of authors argue that that section on its own must place your studies in context. And I think you remember what the background focuses on. It would focus on the present discourse about the research topic that you are pursuing. In other words, we want to know what empirical studies say about the topic at hand that is being investigated. What has been published? And what do we know as the global perspective? What do we know as a continental perspective? What do we know as a sub-regional context? What do we know as the national perspective in South Africa? What do we know as the provincial or the site-specific or the local perspective with regard to the research topic? All those aspects, people who have presented their chapter 1 to me might have seen this comment that I make all this time, that you can only justify your studies or the topic for the investigation only if you're going to contribute to the body of knowledge. And how do you contribute to the body of knowledge? Mainly by identifying a gap, and that gap should be found in all those contexts that I've spoken about. It's the international, the local, the national, the continental, and all those contexts. You must indicate the gap that exists there. And you only identify a gap by indicating that something has been studied or nothing has been studied. If something has been studied, this is outstanding. Or if something has been studied, but there is recommendation from earlier studies that recommend investigation from a certain perspective or furtherance of the knowledge, the body of knowledge based on empirical studies that are there. That is placing your studies within context. So we should know, in a way, some sort of problems that are there. Even if it is not, we are not at the problem statement. But we must be told that it is problematic that there is this gap that should have been closed. So we are in a dark, or we lack this, the community of practice actually lack this. And this is the justification of the study. So the context has got a lot to offer to us because it is everything about what is known by the research. You will later on be able to see how context is then linked to either the discussion of the results or so, because the outcomes is either that they are in sync with the context or they are against. They can support or they can further the existing context. That is very, very important. And when we are advised to put the research in context by this author, then he wants us to make sure that the introduction actually captures everything that the study is all about, its background, and eventually its findings, as you will see later on as we argue. It says, without putting the research in context, we must highlight the importance of the research topic. And I've argued there is still something. I still have to do more research to make myself understand the difference between the importance and the significance. Go and do research in dictionary or in Google to find out what the importance is. And if the importance is the significance, now I want to tell you that the significance of the study, even the importance of study, those that write this, the importance, or those that write the significance of the study, they do it in chapter 1 of their research report. So here you are repeating those things. Remember, we're talking about writing an article here, and you might have completed writing the research report, or you might have not completed, but you write your research article. You publish a research article based on your research work. Therefore, that is the reason why we have also had an argument that writing an article is not a cut and paste. You have to rewrite it because the size, the format is so small. The format, it will be dictated to you by the publishing house. The size and the approach and everything, they will dictate to you. That is why you need not to copy and paste. But what you need to do is the ideas, the outcomes, and the context, and the importance, which we're talking about here as part and parcel of your introduction. Please condense them and write them down as part and parcel of your introduction. And this is move 1, which is to establish territory. And let's just go to move number 2, which is about finding niche. And let's just listen to what the author thinks or views as the finding of the niche. He says here, you outline the scope of your research problem and enter the scientific dialogue. Then you can see that my blue writing in brackets says, refer to statement of problem from proposal or chapter 1 as the article borrows from it. You're leaving your chapter 1, you are still continuing here in your introduction of the article. Please do refer to your to the scope of the problem. And do you still remember what you address under the problem of statement? I've commented to some of you of recent in particular. I noted a number of aspects that must be addressed. That it should again allow you to introduce your research topic. It should allow you again to indicate empirical studies that have been conducted that have focused on the research topic. But the good thing here is that we would have done it in the context. So the way in which we write the empirical research under the context should not be repeated, but it should be shown that the problem is there as evidenced from literature. That is in summary. So we must be very creative in writing, in making reference, in writing the scope of the problem. You remember that from there, you still need to make reference to the gap. You still have to identify what should be done in order to close the gap. And you also need to indicate who will benefit if the problem is solved. Sometimes in some statements, some authors indicate that you must also make reference to the theoretical framework that is of importance in your studies. So your introduction is a very rich section. And that is why it is one of the most difficult ones to write, because in order to include and capture all these things, it needs creativity, not repetition, not tautology, and not overwriting, because it has got a specific number. The introduction, you might find that it's not even more than 250 words, according to the guidelines from the specific publishers, where you would have requested to actually publish your article. So being creative and being concise is very, very important, but being inclusive of the important aspects to be addressed, which is actually what the other sections would have detailed. But the introduction is a snapshot, captures everything. Then the last move, which is the third one, it is the final one, occupying the niche, which is where you explain your research in a nutshell and highlight your paper's significance. Oh, now here is the significance. There is the importance, which I said it should be different from the other people who make a difference between significance and the importance. No, it depends on how they've been guided to provide. But the significance of the study would indicate those stakeholders who are going to benefit, who are affected and interested, who are going to benefit, and the most important ones, your community of practice, your research community, the policymakers, and the beneficiary communities. Who are those? If I'm investigating the health aspects. Who are the health scientists? Who are the doctors, the nurses, and other scientists that make research on health? How will they benefit? How are they affected? How will the outcomes of the study benefit them? But people that make policies, policies affected when we discover new aspects and we make recommendations, is to recommend a specific way in which patients should be treated, or how medication should be prescribed, or how it should be utilized. So how is policy going to be affected? This policy pertains to all health institutions, including the department, the hospitals, any other organization that is meant to promote and improve the health of the South Africans or the global community. How will that be affected? But more important is the patients, all of us, because we get sick. How will we benefit when we are treated? Or yes, when specific medication is administered to us, how do we benefit? So that is also part and parcel of the introduction. It should be summarized. It should be put concisely in a way that it is not verbose. It must not be overstated or be understated. It should be understood and be written in a clear language, very understandable. These 3 moves allow your readers to evaluate the interest in your paper. You get it now? I said, when I want to know if I can read this article, I'm an environmentalist. How do I know that the paper, Brian's paper, is interesting on fire ecology? Because I want to understand how I can manage the savanna fire, or how I can manage the savanna environment using fire. Then I go to the introduction. If Brian and the colleagues do not interest me in the way that they write, by the way, you can find that most of them have got Afrikaans as their language. But if they did not edit their English, actually, they will not interest me because I wouldn't understand them. Or they would not interest somebody in Australia who does not understand Afrikaans. So if it is me writing, then people in Australia or people that speak Afrikaans or English or Xhosa or Venda would not understand me because I'm not an English person. I write in Tshivenda or the Tshivenda English. It should then be edited, and my writing should interest people. In that introduction, it should appear like that. Yeah, because the paper review process is very, very important. I would not continue to review the paper. I would not continue to read your article, even to search for information that will help me if you don't write correctly. These 3 moves are very, very important, in other words. And we're going to look at these 3 moves, colleagues, and we'll unpack them. When we've unpacked them, then we will go to examples and see, and then by actually analyzing the article that has been written on the savanna fires, if its introduction qualifies with these criteria that we're going to unpack now. And move number 1, which is establishing the research territory. And we have summarized it there, and let me just repeat its summary. We said, when you establish the territory, you place your research in context and highlight the importance of your research topic, the importance. And below, there are 2 guidelines here that are specific about this. They say, show that the general research area is important. Remember when I spoke about the introduction and the background to the study? Then you, in your writing, using that information from there, because it is what you have done initially when you did your literature review, you must show that the research area is important. And it is that topic that you have got a document completed for examination, PhD report, master's report, or honors report. Then you must also, apart from showing that it is important, show that the research area is central. You must also show that it is interesting and problematic in a way, because if you don't show that it is problematic or interesting, there is no need for you to undertake this study. Remember, what is my study focus? My study focus is my study interest. And you can only make a contribution to the body of knowledge if there is a problem that exists that needs to be addressed. And this is the reason why earlier on we made reference to the scope and of the problem. So it must again be problematic. I think we are repeating what you said on in earlier slides. But again, here, when you establish the territory, you must introduce and review items of previous research in the area. Now, it means here, now you start introducing, you also introduce what the present discourse is about this study, or the discourse from empirical evidence. What do they say about the topic under investigation? What do studies say that should be done? That is when we've unpacked move one of establishing a territory. And move two, here, this is just those people that we said are the authors of the document. Niemann, Leslie, and van Velgen. But I want us to look at how we establish a territory. And I've even cut those guidelines from establishing the territory, and I've put them in here in this color, which is blue, just below the section that I've cut from the article. And there they are. And I want you to look at this introduction and do tell me if it actually complies with what is below there in blue. For an example, I've indicated previous studies. On my far right, there is previous studies. In the middle of that introduction, and somewhere in the center of the introduction, there is central interest. And there is central interest again at the bottom. And I request you to read. This is a very short paragraph, which when you have read, you should be able to tell me if it complies with what these guidelines are saying from the author. And let me just read. And when I finish reading here, I think you would have finished analyzing to actually be able to engage, because I will pause so that I can give yourself an opportunity to talk. The introduction reads like this, and we want to see if it has established the territory. It reads like this. Savannas are characterized by the core dominance of woody plants and grasses, in which trees that are at least 2 meters tall occur above grassy layer between 0.5 meter and 2 meter. And he quotes somebody, or they quote, the authors quote Scholz and Walker. Frequent natural fires have historically been reported in African savanna during the dry season, and have played an important role in shaping the composition and structure of these ecosystems. And they quote Bond again. But the importance of fire in maintaining vegetation in savanna is thus well recognized, especially in terms of ensuring the continued coexistence of woody and herbaceous plants. Do you think the author has complied? Sorry, I think the three authors, we said the three authors are Niemann, Leslie, and van Velgen. Niemann, Leslie, and van Velgen. Did they comply with what is written in blue, or they did not comply? Do you think there is compliance, or they did not? You don't have to be correct when you speak, and you have to air a view. And if you don't air a view, then you accept that they have complied, or you are not sure. And also say it. If you're not sure, say it by your mouth, because we don't know what is in your heart. You know what I'm saying? Do you have something in your heart, or you don't? Do you agree with Niemann, Leslie, and van Velgen?
I think for me that they show the general research importance here, since they've highlighting the previous studies and then the central interest, the ease indeed, and then I agree that they've introduced they've shown the previous research in the area. So I agree with.
Yes, let me also confirm what you said, because look, I just, when I was reading, when I finished this first statement, I just said the three authors quoted Scholz and Walker. So they are quoting what was written by other people. So in their studies, Scholz and Walker did indicate that savannas are characterized by the core whatever, whatever, whatever. All this is not a statement, it's not the knowledge from, okay, the three authors got this knowledge from Scholz and Walker. So they're quoting what the other people have written. They also have quoted Bond, because they said after they've written frequent natural fires have historically been reported in African savannas, they put in bracket Bond. So they're still saying they acknowledge his contribution, and they think it is actually something that can be referred to as something that happened in the past, but it is still part and parcel of the introduction, as the heading indicates there. So they're actually establishing a territory by following the guidelines that is provided by our author, who is Yin. And here I want to debate with you. Even you see, even if they've quoted Archibald 2017 and others 2017, look what they've said. They said the importance of fire in maintaining vegetation in savanna is thus well recognized. He says it has been recognized by this guy. So I took the terminology importance. The importance of fire is actually a central aspect. So it has been even acknowledged by other people, or other people have looked at it as something which is important. So to me, it is central to what they're investigating, or what other people have investigated. And I'm open for disagreement and for criticism. If I'm hearing it differently, that is my interpretation. Now, they said this is importance is especially in terms of ensuring the continued coexistence of woody and herbaceous plants. And remember, they've described that savanna is actually made out of trees and grasses. Now, the study about fire ensures that there is coexistence of these grasses and the shrubs and the trees. So when they study, they want to make sure that there is coexistence. Why? Because they want to sustain and maintain the ecosystem in the area. I'm sorry to use this natural example, but the important aspect is that they recognize the focus of the study as of centrality, and by also making reference to previous studies that has studied something about the savanna which they are studying. We will not always agree, or we will not always be exact, but at least if you will be able to defend your choices, is okay. And colleagues, I can't argue that this is the only way of writing an introduction. There might be other guidance or guidelines from the university or colleges, or even from other authors, and you cannot ignore that. But anything that resonates with you and it makes sense, please write it in a way that the study leader and other peers would understand it and accept it, that this researcher is actually approaching the study from a scientific perspective, or he grounded it, or she grounded it on the scientific principles. And how do we do that? We read scientific articles and we follow the scientific research process. And we know what is science, what is scientific research. We've dealt with this from the beginning of the year, that it has got stages, it has got procedure, it complies with specific procedures. If it does not have those, then it is not going to be taken as scientific. So even from a discipline perspective, there are those renowned authors and there's those known principles that you as authors, or you as the community of practice, they depend on them and reiterate, and you build your studies on them. So if you demonstrate that, whether you've used Yin or any other author, and if you have defended it, nobody's going to question you. And I also want to bring you to show you that this introduction did continue. And look, we continue to see previous studies there. Previous studies being cited, previous studies being cited here. And I want to read here from the middle of this slide, which says, whilst there is a growing literature, you see now, they have read literature. Now they know previously that there is growing literature on the ecological effects of fire. Comprehensive information on the practical application of fire is restricted. Now they are identifying a problem. And we have just said there should be something that has to do with the problem. Let me just see if it is. Yeah, you see, it must be problematic. You see now, that now we are identifying an aspect of being problematic, which I did not even identify before. And even here, I didn't identify it. But you can hear that they see that there is a problem. Because comprehensive information on the practical application of the fire is restricted. So we don't have a lot about comprehensive application of practical practical application of fire is restricted to few. They are saying it's restricted to few well-studied areas. So it is not in all areas, and this is what then that makes them have this interest, and you will be able to see what constitutes their interest. And I think even the papers will be even come clear at a later stage. I will be able to show you in the forthcoming pages. But they continue to say the remaining information remains scattered. That is the part of the problem. And a review, now they justify now that based on that problem and a review of goals of fire management and the means by which they can be achieved is therefore needed. We need review of the goals of fire management and the means by which it can be achieved, because this is the practical application of the use of fire. In this research now they then show you what they will do. In this research, we report on review of the literature relevant to the management of fire in savanna protected areas in sub-Saharan Africa. The interest, now that is that interest that we talk about. The interest of this review is in the conservation management, and the purpose, now there is the purpose now. And the purpose of this study was to identify the various goals of the purpose is to identify the various goals of fire. I don't know if it continues to say fire management, but that is what they have said. And you have seen that to a greater extent, or let's say to some extent, they do have previous studies. They've shown that it is problematic, and there is the interest there. They even show the purpose. Now, let's go to move number 2, and we'll also critically look at what they have. If in their writing, in the introduction, they are guided or they follow the guidelines from move number 2. Move number 2 says find a niche, and we summarized it as outlining the scope of the research problem and enter the scientific dialogue. Here, the guideline is indicate a gap in the previous research or extend previous knowledge in some way. I think that gap we might have identified a little bit because I spoke of the problem to show that it is problematic. So if it is problematic, already that is the area of the gap. And here, finding a niche, I go there. We have got 3 blue writings, and the first one says there is a gap. Oh, and this is what also was part and parcel of the problem, I think. Whilst there is a growing literature there, and the ecological effects of fire, literature is on ecological effects of fire, but comprehensive information on the practical application of fire is restricted to few well-studied areas. So the gap is, there is restriction. That restriction is only in specific areas. The remaining information remains scattered. Then the gap is they are not consolidated. They are scattered. That is the information. And review of the goal of the fire management and the means by which they can be achieved is therefore needed. What needs to be done? A review of goals of the fire management and a means to achieve them. So that is what he says, what I have analyzed and have found as part of the gap, which is referred to in move 2. And let's move to the last move, which talks about occupying the niche. And here we remember the 5 aspects. The 5 guidelines is to outline the purpose or state the nature of the present research. If there is, then list research questions or hypotheses, or announce principal findings, what has been found out. State the value of the present research, indicate the structure of the research paper. And I want to tell you, colleagues, that most of us in the introduction, we don't address all of these aspects. We only addressed number E. We only say, this paper will look at this and that and that and that. So that is very scanty information. That is limited information. There's a lot that we can do and we can improve writing our introduction. So when we write our articles, we need to be observant. And here is the purpose of the study presented there, because we have already seen it in previous slides. The interest of this study is in conservation management. We have read that, and we said, and the purpose of this study was to identify the various goals of fire management in protected areas. And again, the second purpose is to review the practices that have been put forward to achieve them. Those are the 2 purposes. And I don't see anything further. I don't see any reference to the findings. I don't see any listing of the research questions. And I don't see the research value. I don't know. So he leaves a lot. A lot is left out by this gentleman. So this gentleman did not comply 100% or are not in line with what is suggested here. But this article is published in Kudu. And I said Brian van Velken, a renowned author of fire management or fire ecology. So it has been published. And that is why I say this is not the only way in which introductions are written, but this provides a guideline. And we found that other well-known authors also did not comply with what is being provided as guidelines by in 2017. And I want to pause now and ask you if you are still confused or you have recovered. Actually, we because we have, I didn't put it on the presentation mode, but I think you might have seen that. But I want to see if you are still raising hands or you've got comments. I don't see any comment on writing here. And anybody who wants to say anything here? Chirizi, are you still confused or you are reviving a little bit? Tabiso. And Amon, are you Lucia, are you in good hands now? Do I become clear now, or is what I'm presenting still confusing? Or some light at the tunnel is emerging? Amon is saying he
Light
is
at
fine.
the tunnel. Yeah, light at the tunnel, Doc.
Light at the tunnel. I want to tell you good things about me. Colleagues, it's a challenge. Writing research reports is a challenge to me and to everybody else. Not only to us who are reading these books. These authors have studied and they've suffered also. Then they gave themselves time to investigate problems that were troubling them when they were doing research. Now they've got findings, and when they've got these findings, the findings assist to clear them, to start to see the light at the end of the tunnel, like you are doing now. And then they want to share it with us because they have been able to come out of the problem. And if you don't do anything, you will not come out of the problem. And I want to tell you that I'm not a study leader, I've said, but I'm a co-supervisor. Yes, I'm a supporting study leader from UJ, University of UJ. But I want to tell you this. I cannot tell you that I know all your study leaders, but your leaders are not excellent in every respect, because leaders are specialists in a specific area of interest, whether it is discipline specific or whether it is research process specific. But I know that most of the professors are professors in their specific disciplines. Then there are those professors who are very good in their disciplines as well as in the research process. You see, colleagues? So it's not yourself only who are going to be confused. I'm also confused. And this is why you will see that even when they mark your script or they mark your work, they're not going to kill you. You cannot be 100% because they too are not 100%. If you are 60% there, you must pass. And if you are 50% there, you must pass. But what I encourage is that let us study. If you don't study, you will not become good. I've got a friend that is doing PhD. He's too close to me. Every day, every time we meet and we discuss, he's doing PhD. And he talks about the supervisors and he talks about himself. Then I note that this guy studies a lot, to an extent that when he can even face his study leaders and make some good discussions, and I don't want to call them arguments, but you can see that they differ in their discussion and in their perspectives and in their understandings. But he stands his grounds because he has read not one literature. He will read 2 articles about a specific concept. And when he writes in his chapter, then he is well informed. And when they ask him why he writes things, and when they don't understand him, then he stands to explain to the study leaders how he understands this. And there he starts defending. Then they give on and they say, yes, you're right. You can stand your ground. Then what you have written is correct. Then they guide him, but they continue to guide him. This shows that researchers or students must read more than the study leaders, and they will be able to make it. So thank you for seeing the tunnel. And Miss Nadu, is there a tunnel? Is there light at the end of the tunnel?
Yes, there is, Doc. Good evening, Doc.
And colleagues, I know that not everybody might have had a handle to study these documents or to study this topic, because of course you might be at different stages and you might not be looking at how to write. You are writing a publication, but you are just preparing yourself. But what I urge you is, during holidays or whatever, all these concepts that are yet to come, that you are yet to address in your research journey, please look at them and see what can make sense, what can prepare you, because you will be growing. So if I'm still part of the University of South Africa, these are the concepts and the topics that I will present. I might use a different author, or I might have a different approach, or I can repeat this and even actually improve on it using some more information so that it becomes more clear, particularly when I see that some people struggle to understand the concept. But I urge you, when you find time, the research journey is a long one, but when you want to kill it, you must just be very serious and study, and you can finish it in record time. So let's go back and continue with the presentation. If I make mistakes, you must remind me, because you didn't say anything and you saw me continuing the presentation on a non-presentation mode. Maybe you forgot to advise, but you did see that it was not on the presentation mode. We are now left with 41 minutes to the end of the session. I want us to continue. You see, it is said that some academic writers assume that the reader should follow the paper to find the answers about your methodology and your findings. As a result, many novice writers do not present their experimental approach and the major findings, wrongly believing that the reader will locate the necessary information later while reading the subsequent section. However, this suspense approach is not appropriate for scientific writing. To interest the reader, scientific authors should be direct and straightforward and present informative one-sentence summaries of the results in the approach. That is what should happen. You should do this in your introduction. Another problem is that writers understate the significance of their introduction. Many new researchers mistakenly think that all their readers understand the importance of the research question and omit this part. And you forget that, like yourself, there's just too many to read. And it takes pain. It takes pain, and it needs a skilled person, diligent person, who is strategic to be able to choose which literature to use. You don't have time because you are employed, or you've got your business, or you are busy with other activities. So this introduction is what we said is a snapshot. The way to extent to which the author writes it correctly, then they assist you to be able to decide whether to read or not, because you don't have time to read things that are irrelevant. And therefore, the author cannot expect you to go through the entire document to search for information, for the conclusions, and for the purpose, and for the significance and everything. But if it is there in the introduction, then you find it summarizes. You must remember that sometimes you can even cite an article just by looking at the introduction or even the abstract. Leave the entire body or the long discussion. So it saves you. So the introduction, the extent to which it is well written, should be taken as a serious matter. And this is the advice that were provided by this author. And as I've said, I'm not forcing anybody to follow this, but please let us just have an approach that we think is very good. However, this assumption is faulty because the purpose of the section is not to evaluate the importance of the research question in general. The goal is to present the importance of your research contribution and your findings. Please indicate this at the introduction. Therefore, you should be explicit and clear in describing the benefit of the paper. That is as part of the introduction. The introduction should not be long. Indeed, for most journals, see, they are the ones that decide the length because they're the publishers. This is a very brief section of about 220 to 600 words, but it might be the most difficult section due to its importance. And look how difficult it is for us to comprehend. I'm presenting it for the second time, but we still baffle with the, not that I master it, I don't. You might find that, go to my research reports, they are not written like this, and they leave much to be desired, but I've passed. So it means they've considered the entire report that I've presented. But if I had written my introduction very well, it means it would have attracted a lot of authors, a lot of students, a lot of researchers. So I feel that for future, if I'm going to write something, even if I'm not going to follow these guidelines exactly, but I must have something, whether it is from this author or from the other authors, I should make sure that my introduction is concise and is very informative, and everybody can get the gist of what the whole article is all about. And rule number 5 says, as a result, interest your reader in the introduction section by signaling all its elements and stating the novelty of the work. That is, it might be very strategic or very generic statement, but it covers all those 3 moves that we've unpacked. This is the summary of all those 3 moves. Now, we are going to the second last section. It's about this discussion of the results. Remember, we have dealt with the presentation of the results, where we presented data. Now, that data has not been discussed. Now, this is the section that should advise us on how we need to deal with this section. This is not an introduction at all, and this is the results section at all. It is the discussions about the results. And all of it, remember, is supported by the introduction, is supported by the results, is supported by the methods and materials or the research approach section. For many scientists, writing a discussion section is as scary as starting a paper. There it is. It's also another challenge. That is that we have said when we start, we baffle, we struggle, we don't know where to start. Most of the fear comes from the variation in the section. Since every paper has its unique results and findings, the discussion section differs in length, shape, and structure. And that is the reason why I wrote in blue that the publisher, the discipline, and the approach determine the uniqueness of the paper. And this uniqueness of the paper is what would tell you will bring with it a different length, different shape, and the different structure. And the publisher is the one who would have provided these types of the approach. In my publication, in our publication as a publication house, we want 250 words for the introduction. But for the discussion, we would want 1,500 words or this much. So that on its own, we are told it is something that can scare us because we need to comply with this. How do we write correctly to ensure that we comply with the requirements of the journal that we have selected? However, some general principles of writing this section still exist. Although different disciplines, although different journals would want and would specific unique approaches for writing the discussion sections, there are generic principles that are of importance, and it is what the author is going to guide us on now. Knowing these rules or moves can change your attitude about this section and help you create a comprehensive interpretation of your results. We might be baffled, or we might be worried or be confused, but after having gone through the principles or these rules, I think we should be in a better position to approach our research, our discussion sections better than before. And I want us, if we have read or we have got an insight or any other understanding, those that have written papers before, please do come in and share your understanding. Now, but let's first look at those guidelines. The purpose of the discussion section is to place your findings in the research context and to explain the meaning of the findings and why they are important without appearing arrogant, condescending, or patronizing. Do you remember that we made reference to putting the research into context? We were talking about it was in the introduction, and I made reference to the study introduction and background. But we say and to explain the meaning of the findings and why they are important. Now, the findings versus the context, do they relate or they fight? Because your context, I said, would be talking about the discourse about the research topic. What is known? What do the empirical studies say about the research topic or that problem? And then do the findings confirm that, or do the finding and then extend the body of knowledge in the context? Or are they bringing new findings? Remember, I said some studies might be conducted because there is recommendation for furtherance of the research in a specific dimension. Therefore, you are actually contributing again to the furtherance of the body of knowledge. But if there was a gap that was identified apart from the recommendation, what do the findings say? Do they close? Do they assist us to close the gap that exists? This is what we need to do here in this section, and we need to discuss. The structure of the first two moves is almost a mirror reflection of the one in the introduction. In the introduction, you zoom in from general to specific, and from the background to your research question. You come from the general to specific, and from the background to your research question. And this is what we said about the introduction and the background to the study. You use the background of the study in order to move towards a specific research question. But in the discussion section, the section that we're looking at now, then you zoom from the summary of your findings to the research context as shown in table 4. I'll show you table 4. Now, I've got the findings. What do the findings say? Then I work backward to the context, to the background where I said this is known, international, SADC-wise, national-wise, South African-wise, or local area or provincial-wise. This was not known, but the findings say in terms of our province or in terms of our country, this is the new findings. Therefore, the contribution to the body of knowledge and the significance of the study then is revealed. The biggest challenge for many writers is the opening paragraph of the discussion section. And following the moves in table 1, that was adapted from Swales and Fick and Hess. Best choices is to start with. This is the recommended guidelines. It means this author acknowledges some starting statements as proposed by other authors earlier before him. Okay, best choice is to start now. The guidelines is you must start the discussion section with the study's major findings that provide the answer to the research question in your introduction. Now, I must tell you this. In the last chapter of your research report, you must demonstrate that the study has actually achieved the objectives and that the study has answered the research questions. This is because the research questions and the research objectives are equivalent. The research objectives actually are intent statements that commit to respond to research questions through the design of the research approach. These findings must provide answers to the questions in your introduction. Now, the most common starting phrases have been used, and they are these. These are not the only ones. It is what the author has known and has seen as the commonly used ones. The first one is, our findings demonstrate da 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 da. Or, in this study, we have shown that. Or, our results suggest that. These are some of the statements that have been used by some common researchers. In some cases, however, reminding the reader about the research question or even providing a brief context and then stating the answer would make more sense. Now you get it now. The research question is very crucial. Where do we find the research question? In chapter 1. Or stating or providing a brief context. Where do we find the context? We find it also in chapter 1. And then stating the answer would make more sense. Now, let's pause a little bit, and I want to refer you to common statements that I always make. 3 words or 3 concepts: reiterative and recursive. When we talk about the context, we are revisiting it. Then we build on it, then it is recursive. And reiterative, we are restating the context again here at the discussion section. Then we are repeating it. That is reiterative. You see now? Now that you see that there is a link between the last chapter, the discussion chapter, and chapter 1. And remember, chapter 1 is given effect by all the other chapters, because it has got research questions, research objectives, research problems, research context. All of them, all the chapters are based on chapter 1. That is your research proposal. Do you see it now? Now, it means we are seeing now these chapters starting to be streamlined, because even in the introduction, we made reference to the context. We made reference to the significance of the study. Now, we're talking about the research context now. We're talking about the research question again here. This is the streamlining. But it's to ensure that your discussions are not outside the research topic or the research focus or the research area. And this is what is going to make the reviewers have less critique on your paper. They will commend you, they will guide you less, and it will make them be attracted to your paper so that it is published. And it will make me, who is the reader of your published article, be attracted, be interested. I will read this discussion section. I will have been informed by introduction and run into the discussion section and search for those conclusions, the summaries, and those significance of the study that I have seen, have been mentioned in the introduction, and they are again brought and presented under the discussion. This is important in those cases where the researcher presents a number of findings or where more than one research question was presented. So we refer to research questions, or then the context. Then they say these two are more applicable, or where more than one research question was presented, or where the researcher presents a number of findings, and the number of findings are dependent on what you investigated. What do you investigate? You investigate aspects that provide answers or that give effect to the research objectives, colleagues. I think here you should be enjoying, and that confusion I see is going outside of the window. That line which is coming, light which is coming out of the tunnel, it's no longer the tunnel, it's just there. Now, listen to this. Your summary of the study's findings should be followed by your presentation of the importance of these findings. You summarize the findings. Remember, this is what we are advised to summarize. When we say our findings demonstrate that is a summary. When we have done that, then we are advised to immediately present the importance of these findings. How do they contribute to the study, colleagues? To the body of knowledge, and then to the policymakers, to the affected and benefit people that are going to benefit out of the study, the affected communities and the research communities. How do they all benefit? Because that is the importance of these findings. One of the most frequent mistakes of the novice writer is to assume the importance of these findings. Even if the importance is clear to you, colleagues, as an author, it may not be obvious to your reader, who is me. And digesting the findings and their importance to your reader is as crucial as stating your research question. I must understand your research question, but you also tell me what you've found. You have been asked. You have asked yourself the question. When you investigated, what are the findings? How did you respond? How did you use the findings to respond to the research question based on the objectives that you have set for yourself? Another useful strategy is to be proactive in the first move by predicting and commenting on the alternative explanations of the results. Now here, the antithesis or another way of presenting the results can also be presented here. That is in the discussion section. Now, we are going to look at the example from the three authors, Van Valken and the others. Look at the discussion and see if it starts with the statements, our findings demonstrate, or it starts with, in this study, we have shown that, or it starts with our results suggest, or it reminds the reader about the research question, if those things are there. Or if it has provided a brief context and then stated the answer. So 3 aspects is the extent to which the author uses suggested statements of starting the discussions, or the other 2. That one of reminding us of the research question or providing the context. And I want you colleagues to look at these. And here I come again. And I think the other day when I asked questions, it was difficult to respond. And I want you to look at it. If you can take a snapshot, because I'm going to ask you, if you see any of these, it is 3 aspects. The statements started with the brief context of the research question. If they are there in this paragraph, I did not take the whole of the discussion, but at least there is a paragraph. It should display something. If Brian, if Van Velgen agrees, or is actually giving effect to the guidelines by Yin. If he is not, then he is not. But his article has been published. I'm going to read with you. This review has confirmed the widespread use of fire in the management of savanna protected areas in Africa. So it is in protected areas in Africa, reflecting on a growing body of research to evaluate past fire management approaches and to make up proposals for novel ways to manage fire in the face of global change. It's a very long statement. But the starting statement is, let's look at the starting statement. It says, this review has confirmed the widespread use of fire in the management of savanna protected areas. Okay, let's bear that in mind. Okay, the second statement, although a number of fire management approaches have become largely outdated and novel methods of monitoring fires have improved the ability to monitor and understand fire. Now, they are saying now, as part of the discussion, there is still legal consensus. There's legal consensus on a broad fire management approach that would adequately cater for different ecological or societal circumstances. This can leave managers without clear guidelines for implementing appropriate fire regimes, especially in the face of unprecedented global change. And you can read even this slide and assist me if you think the suggested logic is visible. But I've put the heading there, summary of the study's major findings should be followed by presentation of the importance of these findings. Is it there or not? Okay, let us come here, and here I'm going to pause, and this will tell me if the light in the tunnel does exist. If I see that, colleagues, you are actually not able to respond, then you are not going to convince me that there is the light at the end of the tunnel, because actions speak louder than words. Miss Nadu, actions speak louder than words. I believe in that one. And can you say something now? No, not only Miss Naidu. Lucia, Miss Naidu, Shoni, Papuri, Ndiwuo, Amon, Taviso, and Fanisa, and many more others. I've just taken those that are appearing in the screen. The light is there. You confirmed that the light is there at the end of the tunnel. And I want to hear if the light is indeed there. But then you tell me if you think this discussion has got some elements. Did they start with the statements that are generally used by other authors? Do they refer to research questions? Did they present the context of the study? Those are the three questions that I'm asking now at this moment. And I want you to say something. And if you don't say something, it means the tunnel is not there. It's about to emerge. Can you say something, colleagues? Or you can't? If you can't, I will go. Then I will do spoon feeding. Shoni, Miss Mpapuli, I'll do spoon feeding if you don't say anything. Let me give, yeah, I see, Tabi, so you want to say something? Yes, it's your opportunity. Please say something.
No. What I've noticed is that where it says our findings demonstrate that in this sense, I don't think there is a finding in this paragraph since the review, like it says, this review has confirmed that. So there is no, they don't follow other authors how they start. That's what I've noted, and then whereby you say in this study we have shown that I don't believe that there is the correlation as well, because now the study doesn't say this study, instead it reads this as a review all the time.
Okay.
So that's what I've noted so far. And then whereby it says, and there's a point where it says the paragraph indirectly reminds the readers or with the research, namely, like it says, the fire management in the savannah, protected areas, but it doesn't explicitly say or states that. It doesn't explicitly state it as a research question. So
there's no research question.
Indirectly, that's what I have noted as well.
Okay. And there's no brief context. Do you also say there's no brief context?
No, there is. I mean, because
okay,
they've structured the paragraph in that approach, whereby it is as brief as possible.
Okay. Thank you very much. I like those engagements, those attempts, and I still want to see if there's anybody who want to say something. Anybody, they either support you or they've got a different view, or they support the author or don't, and this is what I want, and I enjoy these things, these type of things. And this approach, I think, is a difficult one because I'm not pointing for you the things that I see so that you can say yes or not. No, I'm just asking you by throwing a ball at you. And this is, I think, a strategic way of actually teasing us to think. And you will see what I will do. I'll make my own comment, then you will read me. And it's a very simple thing. To say a thing is to say how you see it. And if you can defend what you see, whether it differs from mine, then that should be okay. Because that is the way in which, if you were to write, you were going to write. And here we want to make sure that we agree that what our belief system is providing, let's use it alongside with literature and the findings to be able to discuss. And here we're actually puncturing holes, opening holes, identifying the loopholes with Brian Velgen, who is a renowned author, if he complies with what the other authors say as a guideline. Anybody who wants to say anything? Shoni, do you have anything or any comment? This is something on fire ecology, ecosystems management, field management. Do you have anything to say or to comment?
Yeah, I do. I was just thinking that when you are writing the findings, we should not say our findings. And we shouldn't say our results. It's like in a plural way, our. It's the same way as I say my results if you are alone. So I wouldn't like to put it that way. Maybe I would say, I'm not sure if I'm right, but I would say um, the research that was conducted revealed that not our, I wouldn't like it to put it that way. I feel it doesn't hold water like that.
Okay. Yes,
Maybe
that
it's
is
my
another. It is your. I think we also dealt with this last week, and they said there is a way that authors write. They use the first person or the other way around. They use the experiment site or the researcher. They center the researcher at the process, or they center the process when they report. And there were those discussions, I think, last week. I'm going to put a hold on this. I want to comment from my own perspective and put a hold or support. Ne? And I want you to argue with me when I finish. Ne? I want you to comment on what I've said, because I'm going to comment. Colleagues, the first statement says, this review has confirmed. So it means the findings, the results have confirmed the widespread use of the fire. Their review has come out with the findings, which provide a confirmation. All right, let me move to the other one. Ne? You look at the second statement, which say, although a number of fire management approaches have become largely and novel methods of monitoring fires have improved the ability to monitor whatever one. Look what the findings say. They say there is still, as we have investigated, we found that, or if they study, when we investigated, the outcomes indicate that there is still local consensus on broad fire management approach that would adequately cater for the different ecological or societal circumstances. That is how I've analyzed it. And you know why I think you have got maybe less input is because maybe you didn't have an opportunity to have this statement or this paragraph for long. Remember, I've investigated it to use it as an example. I think if you go and study it on your own, you might find that it becomes even simple. And it is just a case study. And to see, and what I'm trying to do to you here is to try to see the applicability of the theoretical concepts, the guidelines that Yin says. Now, is it easy to implement or is it difficult to implement? Because according to them, this is scientifically accepted. So we are looking at these scientists, natural scientists, the Brian Velgen and the others that study fire ecology, that have indeed complied with some of the principles or the concepts that are presented by Yin. And if we do our studies in this way, I think we will improve and we'll go. And you will never forget. If you do this, you can never forget this concept. And I know the challenge that we have, that there is too much on our plate. We don't have enough time to analyze and to read and study. What happens, you know, in most of the documents that I've read, students or researchers cut and paste. And you don't know the logic, you don't find the logic. They will find literature, paste it on top of another literature supporting the ideas, yes, but would it make logic? Is it in line with what they're studying or not? When you get time, please try to study, to do an analysis of this so that when you write, actually you would be sure. And this is where, when the time of defense comes, you will stand up and you are going to bulldoze the panel. And they will say, yes, that is the researcher that we want to see. But I don't want to actually labor on it. I want us to continue because before we adjourn, there is an important section that we must not leave. It might be having 9 or 12 slides. I want to make some highlights on it, particularly on revision. Let me go back to the presentation so that we can move with speed. We're left with 4 minutes. So here we have seen that he complies. According to me, they comply to an extent, but they don't comply with everything. And this is the reason that I said you've got choice, and they themselves have chosen to comply to an extent and to comply with other guidelines, or they've mixed other guidelines. Addressing a potential doubt will save you from painful comments about the wrong interpretation of your results and will present you as a thoughtful and considerate researcher. That is what we're learning by doing. Moreover, the evaluation of the alternative exploration might help you create a logical step to the next move of the discussion section, the research context. Colleagues, the goal of the research context move is to show show how your findings fit into the general picture of the current research and how you contribute to the existing knowledge on the topic. I've said this to you, that the context is the study background and introduction. Now, it has got gaps that you have pointed at international, local, provincial, and global perspective. So if you bring any new insights, then you would indicate it is not part of the existing context. It is not known. No empirical evidence presents what I've found out. So it contributes, it furthers the current discourse about the topic. So it is a contribution from your study. So we are saying that should be made and be recorded under your discussion section. That is making reference to the context. This is also the place to discuss any discrepancies and unexpected findings that may otherwise distort the general picture of your paper. Any discrepancies. We know that generally a lot of empirical findings confirmed this. But under this circumstance, when I was conducting research at Vuwani or at Mamelodi, some surprising results show that this is not the case. Or it might happen, although it does not always happen. Then I justify why I think these are the findings. It is under these circumstances because Mamelodi is an urban or a peri-urban area, as opposed to Mukula, which is in the rural area in the Far Northern province, in the Limpopo province. So that is how I would justify the unexpected findings or the discrepancy between the existing discourse and the new findings that come out. Moreover, outlining the scope of your research by showing the limitations, weaknesses, and assumptions is essential and adds modesty to your image as a scientist. You remember, we have made reference to the scope in the introduction. We again do it here, and we are told we do it from a generic, we do it from the findings point of view, and we go back to the context. Whereas in the introduction is from the context to the specific, which is your question. However, make sure that you do not end your paper with the problems that override the findings. Then, if we have indicated weaknesses, if we have indicated limitations in the study, these, if they override the findings, then you're not doing justice to yourself. Therefore, the significance and the importance of the study would no longer be there, because there's a lot of problems that the study could not solve. The discrepancy is okay, limitations and so on, they are there. And these are what maybe can be the basis of recommending future investigations, but they should not be too many. Try to suggest feasible explanations and solutions. I've said that if your submission does not require a separate conclusion, then adding another paragraph about the take-home message is a must. This should be a general statement, reiterating your answer to the research question and adding its scientific application implications, practical application, or advice. In most cases, we will always have a section that is written as a conclusion to the study or to the article. But here they're indicating if you are not going to have that section, then you can summarize everything here, adding its scientific implications, practical implications, or advice. How you can implement the findings and the implications to the existing discourse. And this rule, the rule is, before we go to the rule, let's look at statement number 3 here. It says, the easiest way to illustrate your tone is to use the active voice and the first person pronouns. And this is what Shoni was alluding to. So this is important to decide, are using the active voice and the first person voice, because there are places, particularly with methods and materials sections, where they might recommend that there you can use passive voice, but active voice in other sections of the research report or the article. And the rule number 6, following what we discussed here, is present the principles, the relationships, and generalizations in a concise and convincing tone. You know, when you deal with quantitative research, particularly scientific research, has got a potential to generalize the findings, right? Because it is quantitative. So the place is under the discussions. You then conclude by doing that. Here are the moves that are relevant under the discussion of the results section. Is to present the study's major findings, state the study's major findings, explain the meaning and the importance of your findings, consider the alternative explanation. This is a summary of what we've done. So this would be available, and then move to research context. We have dealt with that one, but from a different point of view, from the generalizations or from the findings to the study context. And then closing the paper, you summarize and indicate the importance. So I'm not going to close. I'm not going to pause, but I want to summarize the forthcoming section, and we will pause. After that, we have a closing discussion, and we will disperse. Now, this is how you choose the best working revision strategies. Now that you have created the first draft, your attitude towards your writing should have improved. Now they're saying if you have done the discussion section, you have actually finished writing the article. But remember, this is the first article. In what I'm going to present here, they will even tell you that you go more than 7 times. The least that you can revise your research article is 7 times. And the people go up to 15 times revising. And it is said that people revise their documents non-stop until they submitted their revising. And they, even after having submitted, they feel that the revision should have continued. So it means that it is an ever-ending process, but it is aimed at enhancing what you have written. But everything that you have written first, once, should not be taken as perfect. And I think a lot of us make mistake thinking that once I write, no, I don't go backwards. That is a big mistake. Writing is really a difficult process. Now I'm going to show you what we do. You see, even if you have written anything, you will, to yourself, you will feel very satisfactory. Even if you have followed the guidelines that are provided in here, you will think that you have done very good work. But I tell you that it's only the scientists and those people who are specialists who can tell you if what you have written makes sense or does not. And it is actually the second person who can tell you if what you have written makes sense or not. And that is why we are required to even bounce what we've written, even the first draft, to the peers and the colleagues and other people to advise us if there is shortfalls. And the comments need to be worked in and to be factored in. as we've had in the previous workshops. You can see that I write Miss Mpapul assisted me to revise. And this madam is the one that I presented one day that she assisted me to actually succeed in the studies. I had written junk. And this is the junk that I've written when it was submitted to the university. They took it to the external examiner without revising it. And there he told me that I write sweeping statements. And it came back. And that is when I started to consult this madam. Then she advised me. I don't think she might have seen the full report. But from there, when she has advised, then I improved. And the improvement led to what I have today. And the examples, I always cite the role of vendor culture in nature conservation because I was assisted. Now, there is a way in which these are the strategies that we referred to as the strategy for revising. The very first strategy is the macro structure one, and the second one is the micro. The micro is the small one that looks at the details. The macro structure looks at the outline. You remember the outline that you had? You are looking at the entire writing from a strategic point of view. If it makes sense, does it flow correctly? Does it capture the ideas logically as you want, or it does not? That is the bird's view that you need to follow. But the second one is when you go, when you do this macro structure, the one that looks at the outline, you do it logically from stage one. If it is from the introduction, results, discussions, conclusions, it must follow that logic because it must present the ideas logically. And when you do that, you are not looking at statements, you're not looking at paragraphs, you're not looking at those details or words. You're looking at the content if the content communicates the message correctly. That is one strategy. But there is a second strategy. The second strategy is when you look at paragraphs, you look at sentences, statements, you look at words. With this one, you are not forced to start from the beginning to the end. And you are not forced to start from the bottom to the beginning. Or you're not forced to start from the beginning to the end or the beginning to backwards. No, you're not forced to do that. You can start anywhere. And here, you are advised. You don't write more than 5 pages when you are doing this. Because it is said that when you read and you are revising more than 5 pages, then your mind, your thinking starts to get used to your writing. And then your ability to identify your mistakes disappear. So you do these studies when you are still fresh, when you're still strong, only 5 pages, they suggest, according to this author, they suggest that would assist you to identify all the mistakes. And what are the mistakes? Is the mistakes of writing too long statements, repeating words, or using words that are verbose, vulgar words that are not necessary to communicate. Using active statements instead of passive voice, or using passive voice instead of using active words where it is necessary. And that is what you need to identify in the micro. This is very, very important, colleagues. And there is one strategy, which is my last statement now before we close and open, and I give you the opportunity, is that you can read this report aloud to yourself so that you self-correct. You self-identify mistakes. You identify mistakes when you are reading things that don't make noise, that do not make sense. You will understand it when it does not flow, even if it has been written by you. When there is tautology, when there is use of adjectives when it is not necessary, use of nouns when it is not necessary, you will actually identify this and you will go to the specific statements and correct. And there's a specific recommendation now, which is printing the document in a double space or 1.5 spacing, printing it and making corrections by the use of a pen so that you can transfer the corrections electronically. And this, I think, I have been using, and I find it very, very useful, because when you use a pen, it's not like doing it on a computer. On a computer, I think I'm just being swamped and I'm drowned and I'm not objective, because the technology actually intimidates me and intimidates my thinking. But when I do it by my pen, then I'm objective. And when I later rewrite and correct, actually new statements and the new way of writing actually is added in. The one that I've corrected with the use of a pen, and when I type, then new other things come in, ring into my head, and I find that I do very good revisions. And this makes me succeed in writing some of the reports. And colleagues, I want to end here, and I think we succeeded in finishing this workshop without interruption. And indeed, as I've promised, there was no thunder today here in Gauteng, and this is where the majority of you are. And now I open now again for comments. And I think the tunnel, the light outside of the tunnel should be emphasized by your confirmation. You can confirm by saying, yes, we keep quiet, it's clear, or I've got this to comment to show that indeed the tunnel, the light has come out of the tunnel. It's not inside, and it's just not imaging, but it is there. It is hot. Lau tavera uli orele ngachifenda. If it is shines, then you must bask in the sun. That is the Venda expression, the Chivenda expression. Now, over to you, colleagues. Actually, we are 15 minutes beyond time, but I have done this so that we can do justice to the last section of the workshop. And I want to hear any comment. Is it still difficult? Ulisani? Francina? So he's saying yes. It's now you're not saying it's difficult. You're saying it is fine, ne? And Lucia?
Now we understood.
Thank you, Lucia. And colleagues, don't feel scared. If you can even come outside, and we can even meet on Teams to specialize on this on one-on-one. Those who actually want to face me virtually on Teams one-on-one, we can discuss this, and I can clarify any challenge. Lucia?
Thank you, Doc. No, there is some light at the end of the tunnel. I am just praying that I can internalize all this and actually put it to practice when I am finally writing. But I do know that you are available, and trust me, when I start knocking on your door in my writing process, you'll get tired of me.
No, I'm waiting for you, Lucia. When are you starting writing?
Soon, Doc, soon.
I'm waiting for you. Okay, no, it's fine. We can do it over the Teams or through the email. I'll be glad to actually engage through that one.
Thank you, Doc.
And
thank you very
anybody
much.
else, Ndibuo, anything from you? Emmanuel? Yes, Nomhle.
Hi, Dr. Korombi. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
I'm still the prodigal child.
You?
With your tone when you said hi, Nomhle. I was partly listening today. Yeah, our supervision group. We finished quite late because one of our other colleagues, because our supervisor, he does one-on-one, but every Tuesday from 5 to 7, it's a group. So yeah, today somebody was presenting, and then we just had to provide feedback, and now the ethics discussion came in. So I just wanted to share. I'm not exactly sure, colleagues, especially those in departments like your DASE in the College of Education. The applications for this year, the final submission date is this coming Friday. So if there are any colleagues who are still contemplating or anything like that, if possible, apply and submit by this Friday, so that at least it's in the queue, or else it will be probably in January. And not forgetting the fact that some colleges, they become a little bit active from mid-February. So, we need to capitalize on bursaries, because, when you have your ethics approval, and you've applied for the bursary, then you'll get full research allowance. So meaning plus that. Yeah. So I just thought, let me share this, because our supervisor, he's one of the chairpersons, so he just shared it on our platform. So I thought, sharing is caring. Let me share in Dr. Korombi's platform. So that's my contribution. And thank you so much, Dr. Korombi. Although I was listening with one ear, but yeah, it's very insightful. I am looking forward to my write-up. I hit severe bumps, but I'm getting there. At least my participant is back, so hopefully now at least I will have an opportunity to do the interview, and then do the discussions and so forth. But I will contact you. And you saw there, I was even asking whether have you gone back to a Coco vendor, or are you still the site? But yeah, very, very soon we will have our one-on-one, at least when my work is a bit juiced up.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for the information. The other colleagues must be able to apply. It is an opportunity. And Mpo, you, how are you?
Good evening, Dr. Korombi and colleagues on the call. I don't know how I am, but I'm still alive. I'm surviving.
No, I think you also are experiencing growth and development on your side. And since we previously engaged, I think the engagement should be helping.
Yes, it is helping a lot, Dr. Korombi. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Good luck. Good luck. And anybody else who I'm forgetting? There's Mulatelo, there's N. Rumadi. Is Rumadi not a professor? There is Professor Rumadi Don't we have Professor Rumadi at UNISA? Rumadi, are you not a professor? There's Google too, there's Ndiwo, there's Ngandu. Colleagues, I'm greeting all of you. My apologies, I cannot mention everybody, but we've come to the end of the workshop. If you have enjoyed, then I wish you all the enjoyment. You can see we're moving towards the end of the program. Next is Thursday. We are going to have a presentation from Thabiso Mailula. I've told you that, and you should have seen the circulated schedule with his topic. We will look at that one on Thursday. And thank you very much. If you don't have anything to add, and back to Belinda for closure.
Thank you, Dr. Korombi, giving us again the light, working revision strategies, and writing a research report. Thank you, students. We'll see each other on Thursday evening. Thank you, Doctor. Enjoy your evening. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And good evening, colleagues.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye, all of you. Thank you.